The silence was louder than any salute. Cassidy Monroe stood at the edge of the engagement party, tucked behind a catering table lined with silver trays of cold shrimp and finger sandwiches. She adjusted the sleeves of her plain gray blouse, trying not to shiver beneath the vent, blasting recycled air directly onto her. The room was buzzing, clinking glasses, laughter, Harper's laughter, echoing off the Navy Hall's polished floors like music designed to exclude. No one looked at her. No one asked where she'd been. They didn't need to. They'd already decided the answer. Nowhere that mattered. The family's wall of honor stretched across the east side of the banquet hall. Framed photos of her younger brother, Blake, smiling in desert camo. A recent portrait of her mother receiving a service medal from the VA. Even her father, Lieutenant Commander Richard Monroe, retired, centered, flanked by 2 flags and pride. And now, freshly mounted, Harper, in her dress whites, just days out from her cyber operations commission. The golden child with the golden clearance. Not a single frame bore Cassidy's name. Not even her high school graduation photo. She'd been scrubbed out like bad data. Someone behind her mentioned her name in a hushed chuckle. Cassidy? Oh, she used to serve, right? Navy dropout, I think. Now she does yoga? Overseas or something? Harper's voice. Light, dismissive, effortless. Cassidy didn't flinch. She'd trained herself not to. But something cracked behind her ribs. Something old, something heavy. 15 years of classified operations, of silence and shadows, bomb diffusions, body retrievals, black sites that didn't exist on any map. She hadn't been a dropout. She'd been recruited into a program so buried that even her social security number was reassigned. But to her family? To Harper? She was still the ghost at the dinner table. She pushed her chair back and stood. The air changed before the sound reached her ears. Footsteps, rhythmic, military. She turned. A man in full-service uniform entered the banquet hall, his medals catching light like broken glass. Tall, broad, sharp. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Ramirez, her former commanding officer. Cassidy froze. Ramirez hadn't seen her in 7 years. Last time, they were both crawling through sewage tunnels outside Mosul under sniper fire. She hadn't expected to ever see him again, much less at Harper's engagement. His eyes swept the room, then locked on her, and stayed. He stopped walking, straightened, saluted, loud, deliberate. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander." The room died. Forks stopped midair. Laughter cut like a wire. Cassidy didn't move, didn't blink, just nodded, a small one, like 2 ghosts passing each other in daylight. Across the room, Harper's champagne flute slipped in her hand. Their mother's phone hit the ground. Their father looked like someone had just told him gravity was optional. Ramirez gave one more nod and continued on like nothing had happened. But it had. Oh, it had. Cassidy stepped outside into the Florida heat. Her hands were trembling, though she hadn't realized it. She pulled out her encrypted device from a hidden pouch inside her purse and checked the secure logs. One alert blinked red. Unauthorized access to Storm Hatch. She tapped the flag. User, H. Monroe. Location, Naval Academy Network. Her sister. Harper had accessed Cassidy's most classified mission, a Black Ops operation that had never been acknowledged by any department, buried so deep it didn't even exist in after-action reports. Somehow, Harper had tripped a legacy defense mechanism, one designed to notify operatives if their files were compromised. Cassidy's thumb hovered over the screen. She had options. She could report it. She could disappear again. She could let it burn. But the problem was, someone else was already moving. Beneath Harper's access log was another one, an overwrite attempt. Data spliced, location rerouted, logs doctored. Someone was trying to erase Storm Hatch entirely, and Cassidy with it. She drove home in silence, the same rental car she'd taken from the airport now coated in dust and questions. Her phone buzzed again as she parked outside her parents' house. A message, no sender, no subject, just a link. She tapped it. A military blog, anonymous headline screaming, "Commander Monroe, ghost of Storm Hatch resurfaces at engagement party. Is she a hero or a cover-up?" Her blood ran cold. She wasn't just exposed, she was being targeted. That night, in her childhood bedroom, now storage for Harper's wedding decorations, Cassidy sat cross-legged on the floor, booting up her backup drive. It was old tech, analog encryption, never connected to the cloud. She pulled up the mission logs, field notes, body cam footage, scrambled names, scrubbed identities. A digital trail of everything they tried to bury, and in the access log, another name, Colonel Warren Hall, the Pentagon bureaucrat who'd once called Storm Hatch a social experiment gone rogue. Cassidy exhaled slowly. The pieces were moving faster than she'd thought. Harper hadn't meant to open Pandora's box, but someone else had been waiting for her to. Cassidy stared at the hard drive, the one she'd kept hidden across 9 countries. She knew what came next. She stood, grabbed her satchel, and headed out. If you've ever been overlooked despite everything you gave, type 1. Let's see how many of us are still standing. A classified directive appears on Cassidy's screen. Reactivation authorized. Operation Nightshade. Tier 1 clearance. Command role. Monroe. The email subject line was just one word. Suspended. Cassidy Monroe stared at the screen in the cramped corner of the base lodging, the same old lamp casting shadows over a case she'd never fully unpacked. Her jaw clenched. It wasn't about her. It was Harper, suspended from her reserve officer track. Pending administrative review. A young woman who'd once paraded across the family porch in a cardboard navy hat now hung by a thread because she'd looked too deep into something she was never supposed to find. Cassidy slammed the laptop shut, stood, and paced. The room felt tighter than any tunnel she'd crawled through in Mosul, and she'd crawled through a lot. They weren't just erasing Storm Hatch, they were weaponizing the fallout. Hours earlier, she'd stepped into the Nightshade mission briefing at Fort Sentinel. The air was stale with tension. A dozen faces turned, some curious, others suspicious, and then he spoke. "You're Cassidy Monroe?" The voice was sharp, young, arrogant. Lieutenant Derek Vance, decorated, technically brilliant, and clearly pissed. "I was told I'd be leading this op." "You were told wrong," Cassidy replied, her tone ice on steel. He crossed his arms. "With all due respect, Commander." Cassidy didn't wait for the rest. "Let me stop you right there. Respect isn't a disclaimer. Either you have it or you don't." That was the tone for the entire briefing. The mission was simple in theory. Infiltrate and dismantle Crimson Dawn, a rogue terror network targeting U.S. outposts. But from the moment Cassidy received the target packet, she knew something was off. The satellite maps, slightly distorted, the comms frequencies, misaligned. And then the kicker, the terrain render of the approach route to Al-Mazrah didn't match what she'd seen 2 months earlier on the encrypted SEALNet during an unrelated advisory op. The data had been doctored. Someone had fed her team false terrain. Cassidy ran a trace. The original access trail didn't lead to some junior analyst or a civilian contractor. It pointed directly to Colonel Warren Hall, senior advisor on Nightshade, and the man who once lobbied to shut down all experimental gender-integrated combat ops. He'd called Storm Hatch a politically correct disaster in a closed-door hearing 10 years ago. Now he was back, and this time he had control of the narrative. She confronted him in his office. "You sabotaged this op before it started," Cassidy said. Hall sipped black coffee, unbothered. "Command is perception, Monroe. You've always struggled with that. You changed satellite data that could have gotten my team killed. I adjusted faulty inputs. There's a difference." She leaned forward, unblinking. "There's a body count difference." He smiled that smile that had probably charmed 1,000 promotions and buried 100 truths. "No one wants a ghost with a grudge at the helm. You were supposed to fade out." Cassidy stepped back. "You're scared. Scared that if I succeed, they'll have to unbury every lie you've built your legacy on." She left without slamming the door. She didn't need drama, just truth. But truth, as always, didn't travel alone. That night, in the base mess hall, a news alert flashed across the TV. An anonymous leak to Defense Wire. Storm Hatch reopened. Commander Monroe's past failures haunt current deployment. It included a fabricated after-action report, claiming Cassidy had hesitated under fire, causing the death of a teammate. She stood by the vending machine, surrounded by her new unit, watching their eyes dart from screen to her face. No one said a word. But silence is a vote when it comes from your own team. Vance walked up beside her, his voice tight. Is it true? Cassidy didn't look at him. You read a report. Doesn't mean you saw the mission. I read a report signed by Hall. She finally turned. And when did he ever bleed for you? They stared at each other for a beat. Then Vance walked off. The trust she had just started to build was bleeding out before the mission even launched. Later that night, she met Harper in a dim corner of a beach cafe just outside the naval base perimeter. No uniforms, no ranks. I'm sorry, Harper whispered, her voice cracked raw. I didn't know it would do this. Cassidy studied her sister's face, half shadowed, half regret. You wanted a story. Well, you got one. It's just not the one you can control. I didn't leak anything. No, Cassidy said slowly. But you opened the door, and now someone else is walking through it with a flamethrower. She slid a drive across the table. They're rewriting it, and this time, they're using your mistake to wipe me out. Harper's hands shook. What can I do? Cassidy didn't answer immediately. The waitress brought their check, just black coffee, 2 spoons. Silence. Finally, she said, You want to make it right? Then speak, on record, to someone who actually gives a damn. I'll be shredded. So was I, but I'm still here. Harper nodded slowly. Something in her spine straightened. Okay. Back at the base, Cassidy suited up for deployment. Her name wasn't on any commendation wall, but if this mission succeeded, it would be carved into every server that tried to erase her. If you've ever had to defend your name from someone in power, type 2. Let's remind them, stories don't die quietly. Cassidy's comm buzzed. A restricted alert lit up. Operational override block detected. Mission authorization revoked. Her pulse didn't spike. She smiled instead. Then typed one line into the secure terminal. I don't need permission to survive. Launching anyway. The sound of gunfire was nothing compared to the silence that followed it. Cassidy Monroe crouched behind the crumbled edge of a rooftop in Al Mazrah, her gloved hand gripping a radio soaked in dust and sweat. Static. Then screaming, Ambush! West Alley! 3 wounded, Commander, do you copy? Vance's voice, choppy, panicked. Her eyes snapped to the tablet in front of her. The layout was wrong. The satellite data Hall's team had uploaded was doctored. The alleyways her team had trusted were kill boxes. She'd walked them into a trap, and someone had made sure of it. She didn't hesitate. Redirect Alpha to fallback 2. I'm en route with Delta. Prep evac now. A young sergeant stared at her. Commander, that's suicide. Cassidy locked eyes with him. So is doing nothing. Move. They broke cover. Smoke grenades arced through the air. Cassidy took point, pushing through heat and gunfire like she was made of iron instead of bone. She found Vance half-conscious, blood down his arm, trying to drag one of his men behind an overturned cart. Hold your fire, she barked. Then, to him, Still think I'm a ghost? He gave a bloody smirk. Starting to think you're a damn banshee. They hauled out, covering themselves with suppressive rounds and a wounded comms line that barely held. Once clear, they regrouped at an abandoned concrete compound. Inside, a buried tunnel led to a hidden command node. What they found was worse than Intel had suggested. 3 servers, GSM jammers, and a trigger relay wired to detonate a sequence of IEDs, each tuned to high-frequency signals targeting U.S. bases. A countdown was running. 15 minutes. Vance limped beside her. You know this tech? Cassidy stared at the circuitry, rage tightening her chest. Yeah, I've seen it before. Syria, 2011, Storm Hatch. She knelt. Everyone out. I've got this. Cass! Commander! Vance protested, but her tone left no room for argument. I said out. They obeyed. Cassidy pried open the panel, her breath steady even as the timer hit 12:14, 12:13. Wires like veins, circuits like secrets, She spotted the master override and twisted. The system pinged back. Manual override detected. Last access, Commander Monroe, storm hatch. She yanked the kill switch. Silence. The kind of silence that means a bomb didn't go off, and something else just did. Back at base, Cassidy barely had time to wipe the dust off her boots before she was summoned to the Pentagon. A hearing, not a trial, not yet. Inside the cold conference room, Colonel Hull sat centered, hands folded, that same smug neutrality masking panic. Cameras discreetly recorded. Uniforms lined the walls. Cassidy stood in full regalia for the first time in 15 years. No emotion, no apology. "I was told to report on Operation Nightshade," she said. "So I brought the truth." She uploaded the mission logs, unedited. The doctored satellite data, the sabotage, the order reroutes, and then the trace logs. "Satellite access came from this terminal," she said, pointing to the screen. "Registered to Deputy Commander Warren Hall." Gasps, shifted feet, murmurs. Hall tried to interrupt. "That's ridiculous. She's not even in the active system." And then Harper walked in. Everyone turned. Dressed in formal uniform, hair pulled back, no makeup, no armor, just truth. "I requested to speak," she said, holding a drive. She plugged it in. Logs played, time-stamped overrides, code injections matching Hall's encryption signature. "This pattern matches a breach 14 hours before Operation Nightshade. It rerouted field teams. It's no longer theoretical." Hall's face hardened. "This is a farce. She's a mascot. She's not even real." Cassidy raised her eyebrows. "You'd be amazed how real ghosts become when they stop whispering and start testifying." One commissioner, an older woman in a navy blazer, stood. She read slowly from a file. "Commander Monroe, 12 Black Ops missions, 3 combat zone infiltrations, 1 counterinsurgency success, 0 failed outcomes, 0 recognition, until today." The room held still. Then the final blow. "Colonel Hall, you're relieved of command, effective immediately." Cassidy didn't smile. Outside, reporters swarmed. One shouted over the chaos, "Commander Monroe, how does it feel to finally be seen?" Cassidy paused, then simply said, "I never needed to be seen. I just refused to stay erased." Weeks later, she stood on the Jacksonville Community Center stage. No uniform, just a gray shirt, just her. Harper introduced her. "I used to think my sister gave up," she said, "but now I know. She's the only one who never did." The audience stood. Applause, not polite, thunder. Cassidy stepped to the mic, held the red wire she'd pulled from the bomb. "I used to think being forgotten was the worst thing that could happen," she said. "But it's not. The worst is when the people who claim to love you never asked who you really are." She looked up. "But when they finally do, don't be bitter, be ready. If you've ever had to carry truth alone until it almost broke you, type 3. Because silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. And you deserve better." That night, her encrypted phone lit up with a single message. "Coordinates confirmed. Authorization, Nightfall. Command, Monroe." Cassidy closed her eyes, exhaled slowly. They thought they'd silenced the shadow. They forgot. Shadows know how to move without being seen.